little of this, we know a little of that, but sometimes we hadn't quite put it all together, you know? And when you put it all together, it forms a bigger picture. So let's, without any ado, jump right on into our occulted history. Now, I'm not going to try to cover everything, but let's go back to the Big Bang. I mean, you know, they're even now questioning the Big Bang theory, all right? So we don't even know for sure that that's what happened. But what we do know is that Sumerian tablets, that this was cuneiform, etched in clay, which was then baked and turned into stone tablets, and there's about 500,000 of them still in existence, buried in the basements of museums all around the world, and only about 20% of them have been translated, and yet the ones that have been translated tell some incredible stories. They tell of the origins not only of the earth, but of the human race. And obviously they knew something, because we find out that the ancient Sumerians actually correctly identified the 9 planets, showed the reasonably accurate comparison of their sizes, and this was several thousand years before the Egyptian civilization. So the further back you go, the more there was knowledge. It also depicts Uranus and Neptune, and Uranus was not discovered until 1781, and Neptune 1846, and Pluto not until 1930. Of course, poor old Pluto now, he's been relegated down to some kind of semi-planet. They don't consider him a planet. I guess he's just back to being Mickey Mouse's dog. But the story goes that there was a planet called Tiamat, a giant watery planet, and it was in between Mars and Jupiter. And at some time in the long distant past, there was a war in the heavens, which can be translated in one of 2 different ways, either as a genuine fighting war that took place probably in more recent times, or as an allegory as to what had happened millions of years ago, which was a rogue planet called Nibiru, known as the planet of the crossing, which goes in an elliptical orbit around our solar system. Comes through an estimated every 3,600 years, and when it comes through, it's dragging along moons and asteroids and meteors. And by the way, y'all aware that we just got hit with some meteors here in the last couple of days? You know about Russia, you know about Cuba, you know about San Francisco. Okay, yeah, it may be starting. And some people claim this is, of course, NASA says, oh, well, they're not connected. You know, oh, okay. And we know this how. But others say this is Nibiru that is approaching our solar system, is pushing its way, its magnetic field is pushing its way through the Oort cloud, which is the asteroids outside our solar system, and that it's pushing things and they're speeding around. And we also know that we just got missed by an asteroid, right? Everybody knows that. All right, all the way back into the 80s, I was picking up stories and sticking them in my files about scientists that were saying they'd discovered a 10th planet, okay, in the solar system. But here's one from last year, May. A yet undiscovered planet may be orbiting at the outer fringes of the solar system, according to new research. So what I'm telling you is not just fairy tales. So it could be that those ancient Sumerians knew what they were talking about. So the idea is that Nibiru swings through on one of its 3,600-year orbits, dragging along some moons and other things, and one of them smashes into Tiamat. Okay, half of Tiamat is pulverized but remains in its orbit, and this is what we now know as the asteroid belt. I don't think that should be any big surprise to anybody. I know when I was in junior high school and was learning about the asteroid belt, my first thought was, well, God, that's a planet that blew up or something, you know, and it's just still there in the same orbit. But what you may not have heard is that the other half of Tiamat was knocked out of the orbit past Mars and went into orbit between Mars and Mercury, and over millions of years coalesced into the Earth. So that's where the Earth came from, and the moon was one of these moons that accompanied Nibiru and became our satellite. This is a pretty far out theory, and yet it answers a lot of questions about where the comets came from, these dirty balls of ice that are flying around all everywhere. Well, they're pieces of Tiamat that are still there. Where'd all the asteroids, where'd the asteroid belt come from? It answers all of that. So that once the Earth settled in and settled in, and of course, well, where would it have, where was the spot on the Earth that might have been broken off from Tiamat? Well, the Pacific Ocean. Because here's a huge, about half the Earth, where there's no landmass. So again, it all makes sense. And this is what was written down in the ancient Sumerian tablets. So then we look around at other things going on in our solar system, and it even gets stranger. Carl Sagan says that the Phobos, one of the two moons of Mars, exhibits characteristics indicating it might be hollow, and that a natural object cannot be hollow. So in other words, it may be some kind of, I started saying man-made, but it wasn't us. But it was made by intelligent design. And that's not the only one. We've got Iapetus. This is the one that really knocks me out. It's one of the moons of Jupiter. And look, it's got this mountain ridge that just goes right around the equator. Now, I've seen lots of mountain ridges. I've flown over the Alps and the Himalayas, and you got mountains, but they never go in a straight line. This thing, look at this. It's a ridge that goes around there. It reminds me of the wall on King Kong Island, you know. And then when you look at it, it's got this huge sunken area. I don't know if that's a huge crater or what. It's got this line that runs across it, and it looks just like the Death Star. And it gives indication of being hollow. So there's the theory that it's a hollowed out asteroid or a fabricated type body that was used to travel through the universe. It's also known as the yin-yang moon because its configuration, when it's in part shadow and part life, it looks like the ancient Chinese yin-yang symbol. That's kind of interesting. And then, of course, there's questions about our own moon, and for any of you all that have seen my presentation on Alien Agenda, you know, we get into a lot about the moon, so I'm going to kind of skip on through there. Other than I will point out that in 1969, in November, when the Apollo 12 took off from the moon, the lunar module crashed back onto the surface of the moon, and NASA officials said that it reverberated like a bell for more than an hour. I've got here more than an hour. As I recall, actually, they said for like 6 hours or more, the moon was vibrating. Well, that gives evidence that it's hollow. There's other things, too, I could go into. For instance, once a month, there is a creaking that is detected on the moon. And they can't explain where that comes from, but as somebody theorized, maybe it's a loose plate. You know, and when it's closest to the Earth, the gravitational pull can cause the plate to creak or whatever. We also know, contrary to what we were taught in school, which is the moon is an airless, dead world, there's water on the moon, there's a slight atmosphere, there's a magnetic field. It's not at all what we were taught, which is one of the main messages of my talk today, which is most of what we think we know, we don't know. Today, interestingly enough, when they're trying to explain where the moon came from, the prevalent theory today is the big whack theory. The idea that something struck another planetary body came in and struck another planetary body and knocked a chunk of it off to create the moon. Well, whoa, wait a minute. Is this beginning to sound like the ancient Sumerian tale? But it does explain the moon anomalies, and there are many. The best one about the moon is how to get to where it is. Asimov said it shouldn't be where it is, but it is. And what am I talking about? Well, we were taught, at least I was taught early school, that the moon broke away from the Earth. But we now know that's not true because the composition of moon rocks are not the same as Earth. So it came from somewhere else. So you got the Earth, here comes the moon traveling through space, goes past the Earth, it's picked up in the gravitational field, it's pulled back, and it's grabbed again, it's pulled back again, and over time it finally comes into orbit around the moon. Well, it should be in kind of an elliptical orbit, kind of wobbling around the moon, but it's not. It's in a stationary orbit, one side always facing the Earth and going in an almost perfect circular orbit around the Earth right at the equator. How in the world in nature does that happen? Well, it doesn't. But here's the way the thinking goes. The evidence indicates that it was parked there by intelligent design. But we know we didn't do it because it's been there all through our written history. And we all know there's no such thing as aliens. So we just won't talk about this. But yet, even the moon, we do know there's all kinds of weird things. This is called a shard. These are all NASA photographs. This is some kind of structure on the moon that's about a mile high. It's just sticking up there. What is that, an antenna? Who knows? And then we got all kinds of objects seen on the moon. Look at this thing jutting out over a crater. This thing's flying along, apparently. It's leaving some kind of trail. So there's stuff happening on the moon, and it's nothing recent. The lights have been seen moving on the moon all the way back to the time of Copernicus when they were first inventing the telescope. Structures have been seen on the moon, and then later they're not there. So what? Is somebody working on the moon? Somebody got a base on the moon? Well, now today there is the theory and the idea that we may have a secret base on the moon. But we're not saying that's not true. But there's something else going on because this stuff was seen long before we ever put anybody on the moon. I particularly like this photograph. We got these tracks of some kind of round object that's just rolling along, and of course this is a slide made from a photograph that was published. But in the first-hand photograph, this is a crater over here, and the tracks, you know, you would think, well, maybe it's a big round boulder and it just rolled off. But you would think it would leave, it wouldn't leave tracks like this. This looks like a tank or some kind of vehicle tracks. And if you could see the original photograph, it goes down into the crater. So this thing didn't just roll off, it came rolling up and then it rolled back down. I don't think that that's just a rock or some natural object. And then what about these tracks right here? There's another little round object that's leaving tracks running along on the moon. So there's stuff going on the moon that we're not being told about. And of course, then when the moon eclipses the sun, by the way, that's called an occultation. And that's why my new book is Our Occulted History. The very first sentence says, let's get this straight, this book is not about vampires or zombies or devil worship, this, you know, the usual occult. This is used in the astronomical sense that when one body masks or hides another, that's called an occultation. So what my book actually means is our hidden history, what's been hidden from us. And when the moon occults the sun, it's just at the right distance to completely cover the corona of the sun. Now, you know, how does that happen naturally? Now, I'm not about to say that maybe in some kind of weird cosmic coincidence that couldn't happen, but what are the odds? And then you stack it against up all the other anomalies I just got through showing you, and you should begin to figure out there's something going on here. There's even claims that there are pyramids on the moon, and pyramids, on Mars. And interestingly enough, the configuration of these pyramids from the Cydonia region on Mars pretty well match up with the configuration on the moon, which pretty well matches the configuration of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. Now, is that just sheer coincidence, or is this tantalizing evidence that there was pre-civilizations, intelligent beings occupying our solar system before we came along? Tantalizing evidence that there was pre-civilizations, intelligent beings occupying our solar system before we came along. And of course on the Earth there's just a whole slew of anomalies. You've got this ancient hammer that was buried in rock that's been estimated to be like 1 million years old. You get the Piri Reis map, you got crystal skulls, you got the Baghdad battery, you've got human handprints in rock that is prehistoric. You've got the round balls that are perfectly spherical in Guatemala and Costa Rica. You got the vitrified forts in Ireland. All over the world there's indication that there was human habitation, some sort of intelligent civilization going on long before we ever came along. And a common theme through all of these cultures of the world is flight. You've got the flying boats of the Egyptians, the flying dragons of the Chinese, the flying Bahamas of the Hindus, on and on and on, and all the way down through history. We'll come back to that thought. In Italy and in India, you see all these depictions of things that look nothing more than flying saucers. Saucer-shaped objects, and of course need I mention Ezekiel in the Bible with his flying fiery wheel. Hello. We've got the Antikythera mechanism, which was found in an ancient Greek ship, and when they finally got around to studying it and taking it apart and got x-rays and could look inside it, it's an ancient computer. And then you all have probably seen these little gold statuettes things that come from Colombia. How many of y'all have seen these before? Yeah, see a lot of them. All right, well, what you may not know is this German team built a model of this because the theory was these are depictions of aircraft. And of course, the conventional scientists go, oh, no, 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 these are bees and insects. Well, these guys took the measurements, extrapolated it on out, built a working model, and guess what? It flew like a charm. These are depictions of aircraft that come from 2,000 and 3,000 years ago in Colombia. And of course, so there's all the evidence that there was some kind of civilization on the earth long before we know about it. And of course, that brings us to the legends of Atlantis, the long-lost continent of Atlantis. Well, where was Atlantis? Well, today they argue all over the place. They say it was, of course, an island in the middle of the Atlantic. Another good theory is that it was actually Antarctica before the Earth tilted and it got covered over with ice. Some say it's in the Caribbean and near Bimini, and they have found you know, huge stone roads and big columns there underwater. There's even a theory that it was in the South China Sea. They've also found underwater, I don't have this marked, but off the coast of Japan, they have found, off of Okinawa, they have found underseas columns and walls and stuff. So, you know, they all argue with each other. No, it's the island of Santorini. No, it's Crete. You know, well, I'm here to tell you, I think they're all right. I think what we're dealing with here is a worldwide, highly technological civilization that existed thousands of years ago. And we are just now rebuilding and relearning the technology and the knowledge that these folks had, because at some point, either through warfare or through natural disasters or a combination of both, that earlier civilization was destroyed. And then, because everything after that degraded. You've got the Egyptian civilization, which we, a lot of us older folks, we were taught that's the world's greatest first civilization. No, it was simply a hand-me-down from Sumer. And the Sumer civilization, just like the Egyptian civilization, started off as a full-blown, highly technological, very advanced and sophisticated civilization, and then devolved. And the Egyptians the same way. The earlier dynasties have the better jewelry, built the better pyramids, did all this stuff, and then it just degraded as it went along because they were losing the knowledge. And so the anomalies continue, including the discoveries of giant bones of giant humanoid type people all around the world, in the Middle East, in North America, the Indian mounds in the Mississippi Valley. And this, of course, giants are nothing new. We still get giants with us today, and yet these bones have been picked up, hauled away, put in the Smithsonian Institution, and they disappear. And it's like y'all are thinking, well, I've never heard of this. No, because they will not talk about this. This is part of our hidden history. And yet, all around the world, they have found these giant bones. And of course, if you go on the internet, they're going to tell you that these are all just fakes. And I'm sure some of them are. But all of them are not. And we're not being told about the whole thing. I have seen the newspaper articles from the 1800s where they're reporting on the discovery of these giant bones of ancient human-type people long before we came along. And it's all reported on, and then it just goes away. Smithsonian, we all think of that as this great scientific institution, which it is. But what you don't realize is it's an agency of the United States government. They own and control it. So they, they're not telling you about UFOs. Why should they tell you about giant human bones and our true history? Here's a newspaper article from 1909 where they were discovering Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. And I myself have talked to a fellow who said he was backpacking in the northern part of the Grand Canyon when he came across these giant concrete platforms. And he theorized, and I tend to agree with him, that this is where they had the winches and the derricks and stuff to take these Egyptian artifacts out of there and get them out of these caves that line the northern part of the Grand Canyon. Well, wait a minute. What happened to all of that? Went to the Smithsonian and disappeared into the black hole. And yet, interestingly enough, even today, if you go look at a detailed map, you'll find that in the area on the north side of the Grand Canyon, we find the Tower of Set, the Tower of Ra, the Horns Temple, the Osiris Temple, and the Isis Temple. They've got Egyptian names. Well, where'd they come from? Because they found the artifacts. But you had never been told that. And now, when I go to Egypt, and I was visiting Seti's palace there in Abydos, the guy says, "Hey, come out back, I'll show you the Osirian." And I said, "Well, what's that?" Back behind Seti's palace, down underground, so it was there before Seti's palace was built, is the Osirian. Look at these giant blocks, totally clear-cut, no hieroglyphics on it. And stacked up, looks a lot like Stonehenge. This is evidence of a very highly technological civilization that predates the Egyptians. Here's some other pictures of it. And you can see these stones right here weigh several hundred tons. How did these primitive people, pre-Egyptians, how are they able to move all this around? It's got an aqueduct. It's an incredible place. And of course, we all know about the Egyptian technology, these things which nobody quite understands although they do have some sort of power cord that reaches to the Jed pillar, which was, according to their writings, their power source. Wait a minute. And of course, there I am in the Great Pyramid. And the Great Pyramid is really fascinating because we're told it was built by the Egyptians, and it's the tomb of Cheops. But throughout Egypt, everywhere you go, all the palaces and all the tombs, every square inch is filled with hieroglyphics. You go in the Great Pyramid, nothing. It's not there. This was not a tomb. I think Christopher Dunn was probably right. He was a British scientist who says that the Great Pyramid was a power plant. They were drawing the energy out of the earth, and they were using this pyramid to transmit energy around the world. I just threw this in because I thought it was pretty interesting. There's a little weird orb that was following me around. I just didn't want to know what I was finding out. Also in Egypt was this ancient gate, and up at the top of it you can see this little figure with a big head and big eyes. I can't see this very well. I don't know if y'all can, maybe further back you can see it a little better, but it looks nothing more than like one of the little alien grays. Once the publicity came out, and I talked about it, other people talked about it, and now that gate's been taken down. No. Okay? And I think I know, I got a friend who thinks she knows where it might be, but it's gone. You can't see that. You know, again, what they're keeping from you. Karnak, a Neolithic cathedral. This is over on the coast of France. 3,500 years back, and they've got all these stones. This is, again, some of the more ancient places, and some of you know about Baalbek in Lebanon, which supports the Roman city of Heliopolis. Some of these stones are like 800 tons, all right? And Sitchin said this was before the Romans built their palace there, that this was a launch pad for space vehicles. What's interesting is that the bunkers will tell you, oh, well, we can lift rocks like that. Okay, I looked into this pretty carefully, and here's the truth. Yeah, there's one or two heavy industrial cranes in the world today that might be able to lift an 800-ton rock, but none of them can move it. They don't move, okay? Because when you build something on wheels or something that's light enough where you can move it, it can't lift it. But these people did. Something's going on. Here's one of the obelisks there at Baalbek. You can see the size of it with all these people standing there. It never quite got put up. But this one weighs over 1,000 tons. So we don't have anything to pick that up, and yet they were making it. They were getting ready to put it up. We don't know why it all stopped. Some of you may be familiar with the Coral Castle in Florida. This guy, Ed Leedskillen, who was able to put these huge rocks up and huge carvings of marble and volcanic material, and nobody could figure out how he did it, except some kids once saw him. A big truckload arrived of this heavy material, and he told the workmen to go take lunch, and when they went away, they came back, and he had it, everything was unloaded and everything was up. And they couldn't figure out how this one old guy did that. Well, some kids happened to be watching, and they said they saw him and he had what looked like ice cream cones in his hand. So remember that. Here is, this is Easter Island. Now, we've all seen the heads. Most people don't realize that those statues go all the way down. And the reason you don't know that is because they cover it over. They cover it all up, so you just say, well, it's just a head, you know, that's one of their gods, and they threw it up there, you know. And yet you study the legends from Rapa Nui, which is what the natives called Easter Island, and they say that these were depictions of these ancient giant people who lived there before they came along. Another stuff you don't get told about. Göbekli Tepe, this is in Turkey. This, look at this. Look at these monolithic stones. This is called the Turkish Stonehenge. And yet, let me skip ahead here. Look at the intricate carvings and stuff and the detail on this huge complex. And this predates Stonehenge by 7,000 years. So there's stuff going on that we don't know about. Now we get to the idea of the strange skulls, and of course we know the Egyptians wore these elongated caps, and here's Nefertiti, you know. Was that just a tall hat, or was that covering an elongated skull? Because elongated skulls are not unknown. And without going into a big explanation, the debunkers will tell you, oh, well, that's where they put boards on their head and babies, and they strapped it so that their heads would be long, so that they could imitate their gods, which is true, and that did happen. But why would they be doing that? And what are they imitating? Did the gods have these elongated heads? And apparently so. But their skulls have been found with elongated craniums, horns, fanged teeth, no teeth, giant skulls, pygmy skulls, all kinds of stuff, and it disappears into the Smithsonian. Some of you are probably familiar with Lloyd Pye and his Star Child. There is some new developments in this. They have found 22 separate abnormalities in this one little skull that was found in Mexico. And in 2011, nucleotide differences in the mitochondria DNA indicated that one of the Star Child's parents was not human. Okay, but you don't get told that either. So did our ancestors come from outer space? The evidence of alien visitation is pretty well worldwide and widespread. This little piece right here, you may have read about that in Sitchin's material. As you can see, it looks nothing more than like a space capsule with engines and a little seat and a little astronaut sitting in there, but his head's missing. So does that really what it portrays, or am I just reading something into it? Well, Sitchin said that he was at the museum where this little piece is, and he was talking to the curator of the museum, and the curator reaches in his desk and pulls out the little head. And it's like a head with a helmet on it, and it fits right on this little thing. So see, somebody's broken this off, and they hide the head away because they don't want to have to explain to you how an astronaut with a helmet sitting in his capsule happens to be several thousand years old. And of course, we all know about the 2001 Space Odyssey and how the obelisk came and heightened the intelligence of the Earth apes. And in case you can't read this BC, he's drawing a space alien. He says, "I wish I could be here when they discover this one." But it's true. As you saw, there are depictions of things that look like aliens all over the world. And again, we're back to the Sumerian tablets, and they tell us the whole story. 432 years, but 432,000 years before the Great Flood, the Anunnaki, which translates as those who came from the heavens and landed on the earth, came through the Great Bracelet, well, that's the asteroid belt, to the earth. They landed in the Persian Gulf, began to colonize, and they were searching for gold. And but there were strikes, hard work, because they weren't getting enough out of the Persian Gulf, so they found some in Africa, but they had to mine for it. And there were strikes and work stoppages because these astronauts said, "Hey, I signed up to be an astronaut, not a miner," and the work was tough. And so they were trying to figure out what to do. Some of them wanted to just go home, and some of them said, "No, we need the gold to repair holes in our atmosphere." The same thing, the problem we have, and Dr. Edward Teller, the father of the H-bomb, has suggested years ago that we put pulverized gold in the upper atmosphere to close up the ozone holes and to reflect ultraviolet rays. So this is not just some stretch of the imagination. But their science officer, Inky, who had been working down in Africa, said, "Well, I got an idea." He says, "I've been working with these Earth primitives." He said, "Why don't we manipulate their DNA, kind of advance them a little bit, and we'll create a worker race to do all the work for us." Now, interestingly enough, they had the same ethical arguments we have today. They said it's not our place to play God. Only God can create things. And this is true. But Inky counter-argued. He said, "Well, I'm not talking about creating anything. I'm just talking about improving the breed." Okay? The same thing we do with horses and cows and dogs and cats and everything else. And nobody seems to think that's any big deal. So that's all they did. And they even showed us how they did it. They said they fertilized the egg of an Earth primitive female with the sperm of an Anunnaki male, planted it, the zygote in the ovum of an Anunnaki female, who brought it to term, and then through cesarean section, they delivered a hybrid that they call the Adama, the Adam, the first Earth person, the hybrid, okay? And they didn't create anything, they just improved the breed. And so all of a sudden, from Neanderthal, we went to modern man. And that's why they haven't been able to find the missing link. And instead, we all have been found to stem back to one female in Africa. Shall we call her Lucy? And speaking of, in South Africa, they are now finding these circular ruins that cover hundreds of square miles, and that indicate that they had a population of over 20 million, thousands of circles, and they date back more than 200,000 years. So again, more evidence of the things. Here is what's called Adam's calendar. As you can see, it resembles an ancient Stonehenge. It sits up on an escarpment overlooking the African countryside, and because of the descriptions, the two pyramids, the thing that they describe in the ancient Sumerian tablets, Michael Tellinger and some of the scientists he works with there, they feel like this may have been the ancient laboratory of Enki. Not the creator, but the developer of modern humans. Interestingly enough, the Africans will tell you that they're just corrals. You know, they built these things to put their cows in, and yet, now this one's been broken open, but here, you no entrances and there's no exits. What kind of corral is it that you can't get your cows into? No, what they found out is, because they used scientific instruments, and they found out that down to a depth of 600 feet on average outside of these circles, the average temperature is 42 degrees Fahrenheit. But inside the circles, it goes up to 136 degrees. They were drawing energy out of the earth. And in fact, these look suspiciously like a magnetron. And of course, now we know the Great Pyramids are probably an energy generator, and what they found out in 2006, that they're not even made out of genuine stone, they're made out of a poured geopolymer concrete that's constructed, it's not limestone blocks. And this poured concrete has 3 times the hardness of modern concrete. Now this could go a long way to explaining how they built this huge monolithic structure. They didn't drag rocks along and drag it up a sloped incline using mammoths or whatever that movie showed. No, they built forms and they poured it, and they just kept pouring it. All right, so see, what we think we know, we don't know. And the Great Pyramid is only among other pyramids. The Chinese pyramids, they planted trees on them, and they're trying to say those aren't pyramids. But obviously they are. Here was a picture of one that was taken during World War II. Okay, so they were there, and they've been there, and this is in China. What we now know is that the Great Pyramids in Egypt, in Greece, in South America, and as you all are probably familiar with, because they came and made a big presentation on the Bosnian pyramid. And I love that. How many was there to hear the presentation? Wasn't that a good presentation? And we saw the passageways, we saw the rooms, we saw all of this, right? And yet, go to Google, type in Bosnian pyramid, and you're going to get a whole page saying it's nothing but a hill. So, the evidence is clear. There were ancient astronauts, and there were extraterrestrials on this planet thousands of years ago. So what happened to them? They all leave, or are some of them still here? Well, how do you answer that? Real simple. You just simply check closely our history. All right? If it was like, if they all left, then it should be like what we were taught in school. Just a slow evolutionary climb from cave dwellers to hunter-gatherers to farmers to city-states and nations and empires. But that's not really what you find in the record, do you? You find Ezekiel, you find the flying boats, you find the flying Vyamas of the Hindus and the weapon that could blow up a whole city and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all the way up to the flying shields of the Romans and the mowing devil of the Middle Ages and the great airship mystery of 1896, 97, the crash in Aurora, the UFOs, the abductions, the crop circles. Oops, somebody's still here. Well, if they're still here, who are they? And what are they doing? Well, they don't want to be like Charlton Heston and be stuck on the planet of the apes. And you certainly don't want to be one of the apes. What you want to do is control the apes. But you can't control 6 billion apes unless you do it through secrecy and deceit. You get the apes fighting with each other. You know, I'm a Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, man, woman, white, black, Baptist, Jewish. It doesn't matter what it is, just fight with each other, and it keeps your mind off of who's really running the show. And the time-honored methods of this control has been first religion. God told me to tell you, here's how you live. By the way, pass the plate. All right? And early on, the reason that some of this religion is so stuck, and I think the Jewish religion is here, because somewhere way back there, they had firsthand knowledge that their gods were real. And when their God says, I'm going to punish you, he did. And so that has come down, that it's all very real. But at some point, they did not want to have any more direct contact with the humans, so they created kingship and priesthood, intermediaries to act on behalf of the gods. And at some point, the gods were no longer around, so we don't see them face to face, but the priesthood did not want to give up their prerogatives, so it's still, well, I know what God wants, and because I'm the only one that can talk to him, and I'm here to tell you what it's going to do. And that was quite effective for thousands of years. During the time of the Middle Ages, the church, the Roman church, was in charge of everything. They ran everybody's life, including the kings and queens, because they loaned them money. And that's when they began to get the next big control mechanism. Because with the advent of the Age of Enlightenment and with the printing press, people began to read the Bible for themselves, and they were going, wait a minute, it doesn't really say that here, you know, wait a minute, what does this mean? Why does it say this over here but it doesn't say that over there? Okay, so they began to think for themselves, and the power of religion waned, so they had to come up with another control mechanism, and it was finance, money. Today we operate under the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. So obviously, I think the ancient gods may be still with us, or at least some of them. When you look at this chart and you see the characteristics, and then you find that the names changed because of the language. The Heavenly Father in Sumerian was Anu, Egyptian Amun-Ra, the Greek was Kronos, the Roman Saturn, and on down. You're talking about the same personalities, the same characteristics. Only the name changes because the language changed. And where did that knowledge come from? It came from what we have, came down from the Hebrews that were Semites, along with the Arabs who are Semites. This is what kills me about Israel and Palestine fighting each other tooth and toenail. You know, the ancient Hebrews and the ancient Palestinian Arabs, they're all related to Abraham, the biblical patriarch. And where did he come from? He was Abraham from Ur of Chaldea. Well, what's Chaldea? That's just an old name for Mesopotamia. All right, and Ur is right here in what is today the one place on the world that you can't just freely travel to, Iraq. All right, and Abraham brought the knowledge into Egypt, and all of a sudden there's a full-blown civilization going. And what was the knowledge he brought? The knowledge from the ancient Anunnaki. He brought the ancient knowledge of the mafus, or the white powder, the manna, if you will, which was the white powder of gold that we've talked about before. So religion was the control mechanism of choice until it waned. Even building the temple, Solomon's temple, they have found that Solomon's temple is a carbon copy of a Sumerian temple dedicated to Nanurta, one of their gods. Same deal. The Knights Templars, of course, brought all of this knowledge from the Middle East over to Europe, and it's all been passed down. So the knowledge has come straight from the Middle East, originally from Samaria and into Egypt, and then into Jerusalem and into Palestine, and then through the Greeks and the Romans and on into southern France. And y'all have heard my Rise of the Fourth Reich, and you know that this is where Solomon's treasure ended up in 1944. The Nazis got hold of it. So now they've got some of this technology. Maybe that's why they were able to build flying saucers. I'm going to skip on through all this. The Masons from the Knights Templars created the Freemasons. They created the Masonic guilds, which then split into the speculative and the operative. So the operative being truly people, masons that worked in construction and stonework, and then speculative was just the people who joined the Masons and were not genuine. But they all passed along the underground stream of knowledge, which has to do with these ancient gods and the knowledge that they possessed. We all know about the alchemist. Thomas Vaughan wrote that our stone, the philosopher's stone, which is at the bedrock of the knowledge of alchemy, is nothing but gold digested to the highest degree of purity and subtle fixation, a very fine powder. Hello, manna, the mafus, the ancient powder of the ancient Egypt, where they got from the Sumerians. And today we call it orme, or orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. You can go to the internet, Google orme or monatomic gold, and you're going to find all kinds of things. And please be careful, because there's a lot of charlatans out there that are just making anything and tell you they got the real gold. So you need to do your research and you need to know what you're getting into before you start trying to mess with that stuff. But apparently there is some very potent stuff going on with orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. The finance thing really got going in Khazaria, which was in the early 10th century and was laid between the Caspian and the Black Sea. And they were the descendants of the Mongols, who were then intermarrying and interbreeding with the people who fled Persia, which is Mesopotamia. Here's Baghdad. And when they had a big war back there, and an atomic cloud passed through Samaria and devastated everybody, a lot of the survivors came north and ended up here in Khazaria. Now Khazaria, as you can see, sits on the crossroads of the trade routes between the east and the west. And by the early 10th century, the aristocracy of the Khazarians had become quite wealthy by raiding the caravans. All right, but after a while they had a lot of money, so they sent their sons to school, and the sons got a little better educated and said, hey, maybe we can do something better to make money than this hazardous work of raiding caravans. So they said, how about we exchange money and deal in money, because with all these caravans going from east to west along the Silk Road. And they said, well, that's a great idea, but they had a problem, because in Khazaria at that time was pretty much equally divided between Christians, Muslims, and Jews. And the Christians and the Muslims declared charging interest on a loan usury, and that was a sin. You weren't supposed to do that. Only the Jews said, well, it's okay to charge some interest, particularly if they're not Jewish. So the king of Khazaria said, we're Jewish. okay, declared that they were Jews, and as a result, all of his people had to become Jews. And that's where we get the Khazarian Jews, or as they call themselves, the Ashkenazi Jews, of which the Rothschilds are members, and of which a lot of these Eastern European Jews, that's where they came from. Now, are they Jews? Yes, because they declared Judaism. Are they Hebrews? No. They have no connection to Palestine whatsoever. And I think it's really incredible that the Rothschilds are known as the father of modern Israel, because they set up the first bank there, and they set up the railroads, and they set up transportation that electrified the place. And they are the ones who created Zionism in the same area in Russia back in the late 1800s. So when you start trying to argue against some of the policies of Zionism, you are not being anti-Semitic. The Semites are the Palestinians. That's why I throw everybody, they go, well, you talk about the Rothschilds, you're just an anti-Semite. And I say, no, I like Arabs. And they go, huh? Because they don't get it, because we're not being told these things. So the Rothschilds come from the Khazarians. One of the Zionists was Paul Warburg, a German banker who came over to the United States about 10 years before World War I, and by the time of the war, he had helped create the Federal Reserve System, and in fact was its first chairman. And during World War I, he was in charge of the funding for the United States for the war effort. Interestingly enough, his brother, Max Warburg, a German banker, was a co-founder of IG Farben, the giant chemical combine, helped arrange for the travel of Lenin through wartime Germany to take Russia out of the war, and was also a board member of the Hamburg America Steamship Line, along with Prescott Bush, all right, that was funding all of this. And he was the one who arranged in 1933 the transfer agreement between the Nazis and the Zionists, which basically resulted in the Holocaust. They said, look, you know, if you leave the top Jews alone and let us immigrate to Palestine, you can do what you want with the rest of them. So we got both sides operating World War I, killed off the cream of young manhood in the United States, France, England, Germany. Okay, then we go into World War II, and I'll skip through this because any of y'all that saw my Rise of the Fourth Reich, you realize that it was Prescott Bush who was funding Hitler. It was John J. McCloy at National City Bank, largest lender of money to Hitler and the Nazi government, and the Nazis, again, working with the Zionists. All right, then we get to Korea, and we find out that Korea was run on both sides by Russian generals. One was advising the North Koreans, gave the word to attack South Korea, and the other Russian general was in charge of the United Nations office, which was in charge of the Allied war effort. So you got both sides working against the middle. You got Lyndon Johnson, his wise men, okay? This is all Council on Foreign Relations people, and if you've seen my talks on Rule by Secrecy, you know it all goes back to the same people. Council on Foreign Relations, this is one of the outfits that's running everything. Trilateral Commission is another. I love their logo. It just looks so much like a stylized swastika. And they, you know, it's the same bunch. Bilderberg, you know about the Bilderbergs. Now, this has all been proven, all right? We all know this, but it's now proven because in 2011, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology studied, come back here, 43,000 multinational corporations and found that they were controlled by only 1,300 companies with interlocking directorship, and those 1,318 were controlled by 147 interlocking firms that totally control 60% of the global revenues. That is tight, central, controlled by a handful of people. And how do they do that? They do it through outfits like the Exchange Stabilization Fund. How many of y'all know about the Exchange Stabilization Fund? One. Good for you, sir. They do it. Here's a little known agency within the Treasury Department that is above the Constitution and U.S. laws, that controls the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which pretty well sets the tone for all the other 11 Federal Reserve banks. It handles all the black budget for the CIA and the DIA and some of these other secret alphabet agencies. It was the architect of the more notorious of the money schemes, money handling schemes, such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, and has been directly involved in virtually every major U.S. scandal since its creation in 1934, including CIA drug trafficking, the Iran-Contra affair, and even the JFK assassination. And you haven't even heard of it. This is your occulted history. And it's all the same people. General Sula, who I think was an ancestor of Lyndon Johnson. Sure looks like him. He founded a college in Rome dedicated to the Egyptian goddess Isis. So you see how it continues on? And you got Julius Caesar, who claimed to be a relative of the god Prince Aeneas, the father of Romulus and Remus, said to be the founders of Rome, and said that he was a hybrid between a human and non-human. The goddess Venus, which is known as Hathor to the Egyptians and Aseroth to the Sumerians. And again, we can see it's all the same bunch. It's all in the bloodlines, and you don't want to probably go through all of this, but Philip Macedonian, it tracks right on down to Godfrey de Bouillon. Oh, distant relatives with the Bush family. But let's get on to people that you would know. Every president election, including George Washington, has been won by the candidate with the most British or French royal genes. In 2000, the Burke's Peerage, a very prominent genealogical publication in England, said that Bush would get the presidency. Why? Because although he and Al Gore were related to each other and to the Windsors, the Bush was more closely related. And so, sure enough, even though we now know Gore won the election, they stopped the vote and Bush was made president of the United States. Now, but hey, now we got Barack Hussein Obama. Surely there's no connection there. Oops, you'd be wrong. Lynn Cheney, the wife of Dick Cheney, while researching their family, found that Barack Obama is an eighth cousin of Dick Cheney, and that they track back to a descendant of Maureen Duval, a French Huguenot whose son married the granddaughter of a Richard Cheney who arrived in Maryland in the 1650s. Oh, but it gets worse. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, so Obama and Cheney are both related to the Bush family. And they found out that Bush and Obama are 10th cousins once removed, and they're linked to a 17th century Massachusetts couple, Samuel and Sarah Hinckley. Oops, yes, Hinckley was a distant relative of George Herbert Walker Bush's close friend, John Warnock Hinckley, whose son, John Warnock Hinckley Jr., shot Reagan. Now, what do you think the odds are that all these related people are all in there? Chances are, and I've heard the arguments that we're all related if you go far enough back, which is true. So I can say, hey, I'm related to each and every one of you, because I can trace my ancestry back to Adam or back to Moses, or somebody like that. Okay, but now these are all from the 1700 on up. What are the odds? Chances are I'm not really related. None of these people, not all the people in this room, maybe half of us, or maybe track back and could find that we're related, but the other half isn't. And I don't think anybody in here has been nominated for president. All right, there's something going on here. Woodrow Wilson summed it up. He said, some of the biggest men in the United States are afraid of somebody. They're afraid of something. They know there's a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that it better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. So there's something at the heart of the human experience that we are not only unaware of, but that is so powerful we better not speak about it. And what's it doing? Well, let's look about us. We got chemtrails. We got pollution. We got bad food and water. We got trash and garbage that they're, you know, you go buy a 25-cent item and it's wrapped in 50 cents worth of plastic, which is then in a plastic box, which is then secured in another plastic wrapper. And this plastic's going to be with us for thousands of years. It does not degrade away. What's with that? Chemtrails, the vaccines, which they're more and more showing causes more problems than they cure. Water, they're trying to get a lock on the water. When I was a kid, worked in a grocery store, if somebody come in and said, have you got any bottled water? I would just laughed at them and say, hey, water comes out of the faucet, you know, get the garden hose. And now, aisle upon aisle of bottled water, and you're paying per gallon more than you're paying for gasoline. And Perrier, Coca-Cola, they're all getting a chokehold on it. And then 2/3 of the water you get in this country is fluoridated. Sodium fluoride's put in it, the same substance the Nazis put in the water of their concentration camps to keep the populace passive and non-resistant. And Prince Philip lined it out. This is not a question of they just don't understand. They do understand. Listen to Bill Gates. Listen to Prince Philip. They want to kill us off. They want to reduce the human population. Philip says if he comes back, he wants to be a deadly virus. Solve the overpopulation problem. They want us dead. Look at what they've been doing with the police. Used to be you had the officer in blue, and I was always taught if you had a problem, go find the cop. You know, he'll help you out. Today they'll shoot you because they think you're some fugitive. You know, hey, the guy you want's a big black guy. What are you shooting me for? The two women in the truck got shot up because they thought their truck looked like Dorners. Give me a break. Cleveland killed 2 people just because they were running. Come on. And this jerk takes people who are exercising their First Amendment rights and just goes along and pepper sprays them. Is this what we're paying our taxes for? Is this for the kind of America that we want to live in? Are we going to have a nation of law, or are we a lawless nation? We're a lawless nation because you and I step across the line, you try to steal something, you try to shoplift, you try to rob a 7-Eleven store, they're going to be all over you. But if you hit a bank and you rob everybody, well then you get TARP money. They'll pay you for your trouble. How many people got hurt since 2008 in the economic collapse? 1, 2, 3, everybody, all of us. Okay? Who went to jail? Nobody. Who got fired? Nobody. Who got demoted? Nobody. Yeah. Something's going on here, folks. And they are literally destroying and polluting the planet. The world that gives us our resources and our riches and our food and our water. Now, why would anybody with any sanity kill the goose that lays the golden egg? Are they just greedy corporatists? Are they simply inept and stupid? Are they merely corrupt malfeasance? Or are they even us? I think the evidence points to the fact that they may not even be us. And this gives us good reason to fight back, because it may be one thing to say, well, these people, they're just rich people, they're just trying to make a living and they have as much right as everybody to try to lord it over everybody and make a lot of money, you know. But if we, what time we got? You got a time? Anybody got a time? 3:20. 3:20. Okay. Okay, yeah. I only started with the creation of the universe, so anybody got any question? Terry?
What do you think about the structures in Cusco, Peru? I've seen some of those huge ton things, and you cannot put a small knife in between any of them,
Yeah.
And they just fit perfectly.
Exactly.
We couldn't have done that.
No, that gives, hey, I can't even find anybody to build me an extra room that can put 2 2x4s up, you know, correctly. No, that evinces a technology that we still don't have, and but was available to these ancients. In fact, in Cusco, where you're talking about the Aztecs, right? What happened to the Aztecs? You know, well, they tell you, well, they kind of fell apart and they all went back to the farm. They like disappeared, okay? There was a huge number of people that just weren't there anymore. So I don't know. Maybe it's like some of the UFO research people say. Maybe our space brothers came and got them. Any other question? Yes, sir.
You talked about phobos. It has streaks on it that really resemble sedimentary strata.
As like water runoff?
It's like deposits in the sea.
Okay, yeah.
Could it be ejected from Earth that got knocked into an orbit around the moon, around Mars?
That's possible.
Why does the moon wobble in its monthly circle?
That's a good question. The question was, why does the moon wobble? The moon has a slight perturbation to it that just happens to perfectly match the perturbation of the Earth's orbit. In other words, instead of running parallel, they kind of go like that. And both of them. Yes, and it slips a little bit too. I think that has to do with maintaining the orbit. But hey, I'm not the scientist, I'm just the reporter. Yes, sir.
All of my life I've watched the moon go through its phases, from left to right or right to left. Now I'm watching it go from north and south.
Huh. Yeah, I have heard that.
All right, and it's like, wait a minute, I'm 60-something years old. I've watched it go this way for 60 years, and all of a sudden it's starting to go this way. How do you explain that?
Well, for one thing that I know for certain is that the magnetic North Pole has shifted. It's now down into Siberia somewhere, so that might account for it. And again, then there are those who are talking about the return of Nibiru and that it's causing magnetic disturbances all through our solar system. We keep hearing about global warming, and I'm not here to tell you that nothing's happening. All you got to do is go outside Texas in the summer. You'll know that everything's getting hotter. Okay, the world is warming up, but what I want to tell you is that it's not just the Earth. The polar caps on Mars are decreasing. They're melting. The ice on some of the moons of Jupiter, they're melting. Some of the outer planets are becoming more luminescent, which means they're heating up. So whatever it is not your SUV. Sorry, Al. It is solar system wide. And again, that gives support to those who said that maybe this body, this Nibiru, if you want to call it that, Planet X, Planet Wormwood, whatever you want to call it, may be coming into our solar system and it's causing disturbances. Yes, ma'am.
You said at the very beginning of it, something about this ice cream cone, and you said you would talk
Oh,
more about it later, and
yeah.
I just have to know about that.
Thank you, because apparently I forgot to add that on the slide. But both in Egypt and on Easter Island, they have found these little cone-shaped objects, and they're only about that big. Okay, and of course you pick them up and mess around with them and they don't seem to do anything. But the idea seems to be that these can focus individual energy, and if they're tuned correctly, how many of you all are familiar with Rife technology? Yeah, good, a bunch of you. All right, so you know that we all have an electrical field around ourselves, and it all vibrates at a certain frequency. And so the idea is that if you can match your individual frequency with these tools, that it enhances and focuses this energy, which allows them to lift things and do stuff. And I can't tell you if that's true or not, but like I said, both on Easter Island and Egypt and other places, they have found these little cone-shaped objects, a lot of them, lying around. Of course, they didn't know what they were. And of course, just you pick one up and you aim it and try to do something, it's not attuned to you, so it's not going to work properly. But that seems to be the idea. Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to comment that the other night with George Norrie on Coast to Coast, you were really diversified and
You answered everybody's question so good.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm the last of a dying breed. I'm a generalist. I know a little bit about a lot of things. I don't claim to know a whole lot about anything.
Do you have any excuse me, speculation on the mechanism for Noah's flood or Joshua's longest day?
I think, I don't, but now the idea seems to be he wants to know the explanation for Noah's flood and for Joshua's longest day, where the sun apparently like held in the sky for, it was like missing a whole 24 hours or whatever. This gets back to the question about the North Pole shifting and the fact that the moon is altering or is appearing to us in a different manner. And I think, again, that shows you that there's changes taking place with the Earth and with its rotation and with its relationship with the other planets. And of course, you know, we're just like ants on a big old huge beach ball. We just don't really notice it, except for you. And but it is taking place. And again, you would expect, this is the thing that gripes me, especially as an old newsman, is that I would expect to go to NOAA or NASA or, you know, the National Weather Service or somewhere and get a straight answer about some of this stuff, but we're not. I mean, a meteor hits in Russia and then another one hits in San Francisco, and immediately NASA is saying, well, they're not related. How do you know they're not related? And how'd you know within 24 hours they're not related? I mean, you know, this is keep calm, folks, keep shopping. Yes.
Where do you get this information about San Francisco and Cuba?
Hey, just go on the internet. Just put in meteor Cuba and you can read all about it. Yeah. Well, see, that's why you turn on the radio, right? That's why you turn on the TV. But they're not telling you anything, are they? Well, I'm sorry. All I can tell you is you just, you know, this is tough, folks. It's really tough. You're going to have to start thinking for yourself.
Back to Russia, you mentioned Russia. Prime Minister of Russia is on an interview in Russia, and I was asked a question, what about the ETs? And he was talking about the president of Russia carrying a nuclear briefcase and information about dealing with the ETs. And he said, just watch our Men in Black, not the goofy Men in Black that is in our country, but the documentary Men in Black.
Right.
Do you know any additional information about it?
Not really.
The Russians are really...
All I know is I watched that interview, and the interviewer is going, oh, really? You know, like, and thought it was some big joke. He wasn't making a joke.
No, he was not making a joke.
He was perfectly straight-faced. He said, yeah, we carry around the suitcase with nuclear codes and how to deal with the ETs. And you have your movie about the Men in Black, but we got people on top of this. He's telling the truth. The Vatican has spoke very clearly about the presence of ETs. Mexico, they got ETs and UFOs on the TV all the time. People around the world are much better educated in that area than we ever thought about being, okay? Because they're keeping us dumb and in the dark so they can keep controlling us. Yes?
Jim, you know, you and I have talked about this before. I'm surprised with, you know, going back as an ancillary to like Project Grudge, Project Sign, and then Project Blue Book, the absolute apathy of the U.S. government about studying this stuff, you know, the phenomena that's, you know, that are clearly happening all the time with some of these, you know, like the Belgian flap and that flight, the JAL flight. Those are, you know, absolute legitimate sightings. And the U.S. government has just apathy, is what it is.
Au contraire. It's not apathy. It's lying and deceit and cover-up, because I know for a fact that deep within the government, they're very concerned, very alert. They're right on top of that. They're trying to figure it all out too.
Right.
But hey, we're just the tax-paying public. We don't need to know about this. We just need to keep going. You mentioned Belgium. I think that's a great example right there. This was several years ago over Belgium. They're having these huge black triangles moving very slowly, you know, like 30, 40 miles an hour. And by the way, anybody knows aviation, you can't stay in the air at 30, 40 miles an hour. You know, I think, what is it, about 80 to 90, or at least 98, you know, is airspeed. And so the people said, and the government said, nothing there, folks, don't worry about it. And the people didn't stand for it. They said, no, we've seen it, we want to know what this is. And the government then turned around and said, well, okay, it's secret military testing, which I think is a load. But the people went, okay, all right. They could accept that, and they went on. But hey, that's better than we're getting.
Right.
Yes.
What do you think about the Pope stepping down?
Well, it makes me wonder about Father Malachi's prophecies, right?
Yeah.
And we were talking about this earlier. You know, he said there's going to be one more pope named Peter, and after that, no more popes, no more Catholic Church. And what's amazing is that they've already said that the new pope, they're not going to designate him St. Peter. No, sir. Except the guy that looks like he's in line for the seat is named Peter. Oops. Yeah. Yeah, but he's still Peter. And they got to get rid of this guy because Ratzovitz or whatever.
Benny the Rat.
Yeah, whatever. Do y'all realize that during World War II, he was a Hitler Youth? Okay, so he was the right guy for the time, because as the Nazis slowly were taking over the world, they needed a pope that would go along with them, and boy, he did, and he helped cover up the child molestation and everything else. But it's getting dangerous now because people are waking up, and so I like the idea that he steps down and then just lives quietly in the Vatican and nobody can touch him. All right, no demotion, no firing, no jail sentence. Yes.
No Inquisition. Jim, you brought us up to the current time. I just wonder if you've got a book plan, or if you could sum up what you feel about the true agenda of the current administration. You got the media, you're a newsman. You got any words about that? If you do a book, I don't want you to disappear.
The game plan of the current administration, well, to me it seems to be number one, destroy the United States of America.
Absolutely.
Okay? I mean, I'm sorry. And they're brilliant. They know how to handle it, see, so they've got a black man in there. And if you try to criticize what's going on, all of a sudden you're a racist.
Racist.
Well, I'll tell you what, I know plenty of black people. I'd vote for them in a second. I have no problem with that. Same deal here. I don't have any problem with a woman as President of the United States. Unfortunately, though, I don't think Hillary Clinton classifies.
And we have time for
One more question. Yes, sir.
Yes, when you mentioned about the ancients or the influence that was here amongst the ancients, and who have obviously manipulated our history, past and current, do you think that they were always on the earth, or within the earth, or a presence here, or what is your take on it?
Okay. I can't give you a pat answer because I don't know for sure, but just based on all my knowledge and study, I think that early on there were some ETs on the planet that declared themselves, or were declared gods, and I think they were very different from us. I think they were tall. They were known as the shiny ones. They might have had scales. They might have had a reptilian cast to them. You all know that we have a reptilian part of our brain, and nobody quite knows where that came from. But I think once that they developed this hybrid, this modern man, we're kind of a mix, okay? Kind of a crossbreed between these aliens and between early Earth primitives. And they, for some reason, decided to withdraw. And I think there may be still some pure aliens on the planet, but they are few and far between, and they may even be quarantined here, okay? But they got minions. They got people who are closely related who operate on their behalf. And I would mention the Rothschilds, and I would mention their surrogates, the Rockefellers, and these families. By the way, just to show you that there is this connection, years ago, one of the Rothschilds was named Nimrod Rothschild. And they claim, they themselves claim to be the descendants of the ancient Sumerian god king Nimrod. So they know about this connection, all right? But now, I can't tell you how many are on the planet, but I think there's a few, and I think they're trying to run the world, and they're doing it through their surrogates, through their front people. Thank you all so much. Let's go get a beer.